Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the fourth in our series of these Grassroots Advocacy webinars. Today, Shelley Van Pelt is going to lead us in a discussion on effective public speaking. You may have seen in what we advertised, it was public speaking and letter writing. And Shelley reminded me when we were talking through this on Friday that actually this webinar is completely focused on public speaking. So if you were expecting information on letter writing, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but we will have an entire conversation focused on that in the not too distant future. So Shelley, you don't need a tremendous amount of introduction. Member of the Washington Evergreen chapter, a member of the chapter and a member of the chapter's board, a seasoned advocate, as well as really a professional public speaker with a lot of experience with Toastmasters. This recording will be available probably be in the next day or so and posted on the advocate resource page on the website. So if support group or your chapter or others want to participate in these at your own time, they are there for whenever you'd like to use them. So, Shelley, having said that, I will say Dee is on the call here. Dee and Shelley have really been a dynamic duo in coordinating these, and Dee gets to sit back and enjoy, and while Shelley leads the conversation today. So, Shelley, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for public speaking. I just wanted to say I appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to what we have to say and hope that I get to see you in DC. So we're going to cover some basic tips on how to be a more proficient, not so much public speaker because you're not going to be in front of an audience of hundreds of people, but just to give you some tips that will make you feel more comfortable as you talk to your elected official and or their staff, and to give you some guidance on how to tell your story so that they are interested and that you generate kind of that spark between you and your elected official. And so next slide, please. Number one, when we go to do a public speaking, here's a tip. State the purpose in 1 to 2 sentences. Tell why you're there to share your story. Our appointments with our elected officials, they do know that we're coming from the Scleroderma Foundation and that they will be sitting down for just a few minutes to talk with each and every one of us. So to have a nice statement when you start to tell your story, it captures their attention and you start to draw them in. We'll also go over use of an outline to cover main points. It's okay to carry a note card. It's okay to visualize it, and it's okay to read off of it. And then we want to be sure that you thank your audience during the conclusion so that they remember us and that they were wonderful to share their time, and we were very respectful of the time that they're sharing with us. Next slide, please. Public speaking tips. These tips help to ease your anxiety, get you to know your audience, how to organize your notes. First and foremost is fear or anxiety. This is what really captures people. They become, in a sense, have a bout of stage fright. The best way to overcome that anxiety is to be prepared, well prepared, and super prepared. Take the time to go over your notes several times before we go to Capitol Hill and even as we're waiting for our next appointment. Knowing your audience is also important. One of the key tips that I can advise is, if at all possible, try to avoid using any jargon or slang. Simple, straightforward, easy to understand language is the best way to tell your story so your audience can easily understand you, because you are there to get them to know about you and what it's like to have scleroderma. Learn as much about your listeners as you can. It's good to get brushed up on your elected officials, kind of feel where they're at as far as certain areas of strength. Organizing notes in advance is a very effective way for you to stay organized. And like I said, it's perfectly okay to have a 3x5 card or a 5x8 card, because that will keep your story and what you want to say in order, and it makes you sound much more effective. Watch and listen for feedback. This might be a little intimidating, but you can tell when a person is really listening to you because they tend to want to lean into you and hear more about what you want to say. If the legislative assistant says that a close family friend has scleroderma, absolutely pick up on that. As an advocate for scleroderma, and as we get the word out more, we're actually finding that those connections are becoming more and more familiar. You may be able to talk less about the disease and maybe more about the bill, or even something else. Let your personality shine through. Be yourself. The most important thing is be yourself. Your audience will trust you, what you have to say, and when they see that you're a real person, they will know that your story came from the heart. And that right there is probably the best connection right there, is to be yourself. Oh, David, I'm sorry. Did I go back too far? Nope, we're actually doing pretty good. Next slide, please. Visual aids, photographs, a wheelchair, sketches, even a walking cane, oxygen tank, liquid tube feeding tank. These visual aids speak more than words. Photographs of before you were diagnosed and maybe a recent photograph will help others realize the actual physical changes that scleroderma has caused your body. To be able to explain why you're on an oxygen tank 24/7 really lets them know what is going on with your breathing. And it also lets them know that oxygen is so important. A tube feed machine also helps because you need nutrition in order to function every day, whereas just going to grab a hamburger and fries isn't really good for you anymore because you're now on a device that gives you nutrition just so you can get around day to day. Physical objects and props, always important. Probably don't want to be a magic trick or anything like that, but all of the above are certainly visual aids that really give the person that you're talking to a huge understanding of what you go through every day. Next slide, please. Thank you. Effective public speaking. Whether you're talking to a small group of people or speaking to a large audience, you want to be sure your speech is memorable and enjoyable. So again, going back to being prepared, you're going to talk for maybe 4 to 5 minutes, but in that 4 to 5 minutes, which seems like such a small amount of time, or if you're super nervous, it seems like 3 hours, being prepared is the best way for you to effectively get your story across and to get into the connection with your elected official. Rehearsing enough to be confident. Ways to do that is you can rehearse in front of a mirror. You can have somebody film you with their cell phone, and then that'll give you an idea of how you look when you're going to go ahead and give your story. And with confidence, you can actually leave a good impression. Start strong. A powerful opening will grab your audience attention right away. And it starts out and your story is now interesting. To start strong in that first sentence or two, introduce yourself Tell them you're from the Scleroderma Foundation. And in one small comment, let them know how scleroderma has affected you. Those are the strongest key points on how to grab somebody and then move right into your story. Try and be conversational. If you can, and you have to look at your notes, absolutely, go right ahead. That outline will keep you organized. But try and flow easily in a conversation. If you can get your listener to engage in a two-way conversation, they might ask you some questions as to, well, why are you on oxygen? Or why are your hands so tight that your fingers are curled over? Show them your hand. Show them your oxygen tank. Let them know the purpose of these props. And let me tell you, these are powerful ways to keep them engaged with you. Also, you still want to be brief. Be mindful of others in your group because our groups are about 4 to 5 people. And everybody wants to have a chance to tell their story. And everybody's story is just as important as the person sitting next to you. So give your story, make it brief, make it very impactful, and go ahead and let others share their story. Next slide, please. Qualities of an effective speaker. Be informative. You may be able to state while you're there in 1 to 2 sentences. And again, introduce yourself. Tell them you're with the Scleroderma Foundation. Know the bill that you're there to accomplish. And we will talk about that in just a few minutes. Confidence. Be confident. You are the expert of your story. And you became the expert of your story because you're going to talk about you. You're going to talk about how scleroderma affects you. Nobody else can tell with as much emotion and as much detail as you can talk about you, your story. If asked a question and you don't know the answer, it's okay to look to your group to help to respond. That gives the listener a chance to know that everybody there has been affected by scleroderma in one way or another. You want to be patient. You are going to make mistakes. Hey, that's okay. Public speaking is not easy. You're still a little bit nervous. Take a deep breath, let it out, and simply restart from where you stopped. Keep practicing, and you will get more and more comfortable. Speak with passion. This actually is easier than said because you're talking about you. Your passion will shine through. So be yourself. Take your time to share your feelings about the topic. Also with being yourself, humor sometimes plays into all of this. If it's in your personality, absolutely be yourself, but try not to be inappropriate. Not a good time to start laying out all those jokes. Just be yourself, smile, and if you make someone laugh, absolutely A-okay. It's kind of nice. Kind of breaks the tension. Again, being brief. If there are others in your group, again, we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to tell their story. Their few minutes are just as important as yours. And we want to make sure that we stay within the timeline because we only have a set amount of time. And to allow everybody to speak is imperative. In the end, make that connection. The minute we actually walk through the door, we have already started that connection. You might not pick up on it, but they are ready to hear our story. And shake a hand, tell them thank you, and to be sure to make good eye contact, smile, because we're not there to make anybody feel sorry for us. We are there to let them know how scleroderma affects us and how we would like them to respond to the bill that's coming up. So these are all very good tips that will help you to become an effective public speaker. Next slide, David. I think some of the most important ways of communicating without speaking is gestures and body language. Speakers use nonverbal communication all the time. You've probably seen people speak and they're waving their hands or they're imitating a hitchhiker. This lets the listener know that there are other ways to communicate. Eye contact, probably one of the most important, establishes a bond with your audience. Sometimes you might catch yourself staring. That happens when you're nervous. But if you find yourself staring, shift your eyes to one of the members of your group and then shift back, and that will break that. But then it also shows that you're including everybody in your story. And yes, it's okay to blink. And if it comes out and you don't blink, that's okay too. You might just have a little bit of dry eye. It is okay to look at reference notes. It shows that you came prepared and that you are focused. Just don't read directly from the notes. But if you have to, that's okay also. When you want to share your story, you want to control your mannerisms. Mannerisms are there when you're nervous. Some people like to tap on the table. Some people like to twiddle their thumbs. But you want to make sure that you show confidence, because sometimes when a person is nervous, a speaker might not be aware of these body movements. It might be okay to put your hands in your pocket, lock your fingers together on your lap, or even if you just want to hold your note card in front of you and then just gently put your hands on the table. These are ways that you can control these mannerisms. It is okay to be nervous, and if you tap on the table, one of your friends just might reach over and place their hand on your hand. Don't be offended. You might not know that you're actually doing that. If you want, you can use filler words. I don't recommend them too often, but an occasional or ah might happen. Actually, it happens a lot more than realized. But if you practice your speech before we go, you'll actually find out those ums and ahs disappear. Put verbs into action. Again, using your face and hands to emphasize emotion can really draw in your audience. So if you wanted to show your hands and show how scleroderma has affected them, or maybe even if you can't smile, you can tell the person that you're talking to, watch how I try and smile. And they will just be probably quite amazed. And that is such a great physical way to show them how scleroderma has affected you. And it's actually okay to share how your hands, how your skin has been affected. Next slide, please. Speaking to a diverse audience probably sounds more intimidating than it really is. There are some tips and techniques that we just quickly want to go over to help you when you speak to a diverse audience. What is nice about the people that we're going to go talk to is that they have a vast amount of experience talking to people who come to them and they want to talk about a cause. A few tips quickly is enunciating as clearly as you can is the best way to clearly get your message across. Again, try and avoid that jargon or that slang, but talk clearly and tell them your story. Show that emotion, show them that passion, and you will do just fine. Try not to speak too fast. And like I had said earlier, take a deep breath, let it out, and just remember your normal pace of speech. If you catch yourself speaking too fast, don't worry about it. Just kind of stop for a moment, and you can smile and look around, and then just start where you left off. Speaking fast is a very common nervous habit, but taking that deep breath can actually calm you down, and you'll be relatively surprised on how normal you're going to talk. Next. Again, speaking to that diverse audience is important. You want to be careful with metaphors that are kind of, those sayings, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Those are things that might be appropriate and you might understand it, but for our listener and our audience, we just want to speak very clearly very easy to understand, and at a normal pace. So it's probably a good idea to find your story and write it out and make it as clear and as succinct as possible. Sometimes metaphors are appropriate in situations, and then again, they may not be in others. I don't like to take that gamble. I like to make sure that when I'm speaking, I speak in very easy terms, and I like to make it clear. I like to make sure that my gestures are appropriate. And of all things, I like to make sure that the people that I'm talking to understand, and through questioning and feedback, I know that I was able to get my story across. Again, the language of slang, jargon, and idiomatic expressions, diverse audiences, again, might not understand where you're coming from. And so simplicity to your story is really the best way to get it across. You want to be mindful of your body language. Eye contact, hand gestures, even personal space can offend somebody, but luckily our cultures are pretty much all the same here. I wouldn't necessarily use hand gestures in a negative way, but when I talk myself, I find that I do use my hands. I feel that it emphasizes some points that I want to make. So when I talk, I give very strong either fist-like gestures, or I will clasp my hands when I want to make a statement on how I might feel emotionally. I somehow developed these over time. If you record yourself practicing, watch your gestures, your body language. When you talk with your audience, turn towards them and make good eye contact. And at the same time, sit up straight, keep your chin up, and the person that you're talking to will be engaged right away, because those are the body languages of a person who is a good speaker. Next slide, please. When talking to your elected officials, absolutely identify yourself as a constituent and inform them why you are there. So as an example, hi, my name is Shelley Van Pelt. I'm with the Scleroderma Foundation, and I'm here to tell you my story of how scleroderma has affected me. That sentence right there gives them all the information they need to know before you start your story. You want to tell the aide that you are a member of the Scleroderma Foundation and to ask the legislature to co-sponsor the H.R. 4638, which is the National Commission on Scleroderma and Fibrotic Disease Act of 2017. David, was there anything you wanted to share about that bill here?
No, nothing in particular. I mean, if you take that entire National Commission on Scleroderma and Fibrotic Diseases Act, and if you, so you could Google it. At the end of this presentation, there's a link. If you just type that link into your browser, it'll take you to this bill and you can sign up to receive alerts when a new co-sponsor has signed on, or anything that's related to it. You can either bookmark it and go back and look at it, or you can sign up to receive updates when any change, not a change to the bill, but any action related to that bill. So again, that link is going to be on the resources slide at the end of the presentation. Right.
Okay. Thank you very much. Again, you're there to share your story. You are the person that they want to hear from on how scleroderma has affected you. The key talking points, like David was mentioning, is no new spending, not a single disease-related bill. Again, go to the website, provide your contact information. We will give you a card that has your name on it and how to contact you. These are important pieces of information. And as you get ready to walk out the door, grab the business card of the person that you went to speak to, because that business card will help you contact your constituent after we get back from DC. And that is very, very important, because our job doesn't just end that day. It actually continues throughout the rest of the year. So give them your contact information, ask to be informed about actions of the legislation on this key issue, and of course, always remember to thank the person you spoke to for their time and for their attention. We want to be a very gracious group, and we certainly want to leave them with a positive experience, even though our disease and how it affects us can be very, very negative. We want to make sure that we leave them with a very positive experience. Next slide. Talking to your elected officials. Boy, just that title right there starts to get most people's heart pumping. A little faster heart rate, a little bit faster breathing, but you know what? With these tips, you're going to do just fine. You want to explain scleroderma briefly in the foundation language. It's a chronic connective tissue disease, generally classified as an autoimmune rheumatoid disease. You want to make it brief, but these people are going to want to know while you're there. It's important for the advocates to be familiar with the language that the Scleroderma Foundation uses when talking about the disease. Because scleroderma is not that well known, we want to give them very quickly an idea of what it does. And we all know that it damages our organs, possibly, sometimes more than one organ. It's very important that they know this. Some people show scleroderma outwardly. Some people show scleroderma inwardly. I'm a person who shows it inwardly. My lungs and my GI tract are affected. But if you saw me just in a group of people, you would never know my day-to-day struggles of just to breathe, or even just to have food that I can digest appropriately to supply my body with the appropriate nutrients. So it's a good idea just to let them know about you and how you're going through this and how it does affect a person's body. There are 300,000 people in the U.S. today alive with scleroderma. I feel that number might actually be higher. It seems like more and more people are joining local support groups. Diagnosis is getting more proficient, but the purpose of us being there is to let our constituents know that the cause is unknown and there is no cure. And that is why this House bill is so important. As a representative of the Scleroderma Foundation, please use the language again by the website, and you want to make sure that scleroderma.org is an excellent resource for information. Look for the What is Scleroderma on the home page and ask your constituents to read what scleroderma is all about. I should go back just a little bit. As a representative of the Scleroderma Foundation, again, please use the language and facts that have been properly vetted by the Foundation's Medical and Scientific Advisory Board. This is key because we want to make sure that we are giving factual information and that we're not just pulling facts or so-called facts out of the air. And so we will be talking with our elected officials using very specific language. Next slide, please. David, can I ask that you go back one? I apologize. The Foundation's primary goal. So key, and I apologize. Our goal is to raise funds and awareness for the threefold mission of support, education, and research. Through these three avenues, we again are hoping to find a cure for scleroderma. Next slide, please. Any questions? So I'm going to go ahead and open up the question format now. David and I are here to answer questions. It can be about how to get your speech together. And I certainly want to let you know that you can reach me. My email is attached to this website here. And certainly we'd be happy to practice with you over the phone, even if that's where you need help. Anything from you, David?
Just to say what's at the bottom part of the slide, that we are going to have, I see Cindy Martin's question there about business cards. That's a really good question. Cindy's asking the question if each person needs to have his or her own business card to leave behind. We have some kind of somewhat generic business cards that have the foundation's logo, the contact information for the foundation. We intentionally left the backs of them clear or blank, and we're going to share those with everyone who comes to Capitol Hill Day so they can write their own personal contact information down and leave it with the people that they meet with. There may be an opportunity to if you made a personal connection about maybe you and the elected official are from the same town, make that note, kind of jog the memory on the back of the card. So we'll provide those. People are also encouraged, if you have your own business card that you prefer to use, to do that as well. But we will provide a resource for that. Cindy, does that address your question?
Perfect. Thank you, David.
Great. Thank you. Also, we will have scholarship information and registration information for Capitol Hill Day available in the next week to 10. Well, probably I'm saying early February, but it will be that first week of February.
Excellent. I have one more tip, which some of you might find helpful, some of you might find a little silly. Before I do a public speech, just outside the door where usually no one can see me, I do what we call the superhero pose. So if you've ever watched any of the Avenger movies or anything, it's where the Superman movie is perfect. You put your hands on your hips, you strut your chest out, and you just feel like your superhero cape is flying in the wind. Take a deep breath, and let me tell you, it definitely calms the nerves, and it makes you feel more confident as you get ready to tell your story. Well, David, I think that's all I have.
Yeah. So one thing that just popped into my mind, because last year I've only been one time, and one thing that happened, because we probably had 10 meetings that day, is you can kind of get into your groups, kind of what their skill set pops out after the first couple of meetings. And say if I'm in the same group with Shelley, Shelley may be really good at making that first impression and saying, here's why we're here. And you'll kind of find who's really a good person. Your group will kind of blend together, or it won't. We've had that happen too. But if we could be more intentional at helping equip people, I think it's going to help the groups blend together and really kind of play off of each other's strengths and skill sets more effectively. So that's something that we're working on, not just for individuals to be effective, but for the small group to also be effective.
That's a great tip, David. Very, very nicely said. And I am also available if anybody would like on Capitol Hill Day, I think the night before. I'm more than happy to work with groups individually to kind of help them homogenize and find out, is there a natural leader? Is there a natural person who makes that first impression? Or however the dynamic of the group might want to work together, and be more than happy to do that.
Also, on this slide that I just turned, the second website there, that's if you go to that site, or to that path, if you follow that path to get to Bill, it's House Bill 4638, which was the one that was introduced by Representative Peter King of New York into the 115th Congress. So that's the bill that we're going to be advocating for. So if you want to follow along how that bill is being related to any action, any co-sponsorship, you can either just go to that site and look at it when you think about it, and there is a place on there where you can sign up to receive alerts when there is change or any action related to that bill.
If I might say, for those of us who are interested in the Toastmasters.org, if you would like to see or get even further tips on how to be a more effective speaker, go to Toastmasters.org or go to YouTube and type in Toastmasters, and you will find many, many very short videos on tips on how to be an effective speaker.
Great idea.
That's where I go. Talk about this, David?
Well, I'm sorry?
Oh, the grass advocacy training, our next webinar.
Yep, our next webinar is Monday, February the 26th, and it's going to be focused more on the actual meeting. This is going to be after the application and scholarship information will be out in people's hands. So I imagine there will be a much more focused questions that will help us prepare for this particular webinar. So we're starting to move into the season of advocacy. It's always advocacy, but the actual season of Capitol Hill Day. And so people are going to start thinking about advocacy more so than has really been kind of on people's minds. So I think we'll see more interest in these sessions. That's why we recorded them, so people can start at the beginning and watch them at their leisure. Hopefully you all know how to get in touch with me, with Shelley, Dee as well, or I can pass along to Dee if you have any questions. But we will immediately start working on the next webinar, and I really appreciate everyone's participation. And again, if you have any questions, please let us know.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Shelley. Good job. Bye, everybody.